Jane Miller had always been different from the other folks in Pine Creek. While her neighbors spent evenings watching TV, she stayed up late in her makeshift lab, mixing chemicals and reading science books. Living alone in her grandmother's old farmhouse gave her the space and quiet she needed for her experiments. That Tuesday night started like any other. Jane was checking on her plant samples when a bright flash lit up the sky outside her window. At first, she thought it was lightning, but the blue-green glow lingered too long. Curiosity got the better of her as she grabbed her flashlight and stepped out into the cool night air. Following the fading light, Jane made her way to the old tool shed at the edge of her property. The padlock hung broken on the door. Inside, among the rusty garden tools and dusty boxes, something moved. "Hello?" Jane called, her voice shaking slightly. "Is someone there?" A soft blue glow pulsed from behind her grandfather's workbench. Jane moved closer, flashlight beam trembling in her hand. What she found made her gasp. It wasn't human. About the size of a small dog, with smooth blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer with tiny lights. 4 thin limbs and a round head with large, dark eyes that stared at her with unmistakable intelligence. An alien. A real, living alien creature. Instead of fear, Jane felt excitement rush through her body. This was the discovery of a lifetime. The creature seemed injured, a strange clear fluid leaking from its side. "You're hurt," she whispered. The alien skin flashed with patterns of light, almost like it was trying to speak. Jane made a quick decision. She wouldn't call anyone, not the police, not the government. They would take it away, lock it up in some secret lab. This was her discovery. Using an old pet carrier from the house, Jane carefully transported the alien to her basement lab. She created a makeshift cage using a glass tank she normally used for plant experiments. "I'll call you Blue," she said, watching as the creature weakly explored its new prison. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." As Jane began writing her first notes, Blue's skin flashed in a strange pattern. Jane looked up, startled. The lights had formed 4 distinct shapes, J-N-E. It knew her name. Jane couldn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with questions about her new guest. By morning, she had already filled 10 pages in her notebook with observations. Blue seemed to be getting stronger. The wound on its side had almost completely closed, healing at a rate that defied everything Jane knew about biology. She set up a camera to record Blue's movements and began testing what it might eat. Water was accepted eagerly. Fresh vegetables were examined but ignored. When Jane offered a small dish of sugar water, Blue's skin rippled with excitement, the tiny lights beneath its surface pulsing rapidly as it absorbed the liquid directly through its skin. "Fascinating," Jane whispered, scribbling notes. "You don't have a mouth, do you? You absorb nutrients directly." After 3 days of observation, Jane had developed a simple communication system. She created cards with basic symbols: water, food, danger, help, and Blue quickly learned to point to what it needed. More impressively, Blue began creating its own symbols using the light patterns on its skin. One evening, Blue formed a pattern that looked like a small craft, followed by a crashing motion. "Your ship crashed?" Jane asked. Blue's lights pulsed once, yes. "Are others looking for you?" 2 pulses, no. Jane felt a mix of relief and excitement. The alien was hers alone to study. As Blue grew stronger, Jane's experiments became bolder. She collected small tissue samples while Blue slept, examining them under her microscope. The cells were unlike anything on Earth. They communicated with each other through tiny electrical signals, rebuilding damaged structures in minutes. "Your healing ability is incredible," Jane told Blue, who watched her with those large, unblinking eyes. "I wonder what else you can do." Jane began testing Blue's reactions to different environments: heat, cold, darkness, loud sounds. She recorded everything meticulously. When Blue showed signs of discomfort, Jane noted it but continued anyway. Her scientific curiosity was taking priority over any concern for Blue's well-being. One night, Jane extracted a small vial of the clear fluid that served as Blue's blood. Under the microscope, It revealed structures that seemed to repair damaged cells they touched. Jane looked from the microscope to Blue, a new idea forming in her mind. This discovery could change everything. It could change her. Jane's research took an exciting turn when she noticed something remarkable. A drop of Blue's fluid had accidentally fallen onto a dying plant leaf, and within hours, the leaf had become green and healthy again. This discovery sent her mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, Jane found her pet mouse, Spot, lying still in its cage. The old mouse had been sick for weeks, barely eating. Perfect timing for a test. Just a tiny amount, Jane whispered, drawing a small sample from Blue. The alien's lights flashed rapidly in what seemed like protest, but Jane was too focused on her experiment to notice. She carefully injected a drop of the diluted fluid into Spot. Within an hour, the mouse was not only awake but running energetically around its cage. "It works on animals too!" Jane exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "Do you understand what this means, Blue? Your blood could cure diseases, extend life. It could change human medicine forever." Blue's skin formed patterns Jane had never seen before. One symbol kept repeating, a circle with a line through it. "Warning. Danger." "Don't worry," Jane said dismissively. "I'm being very careful." Over the next few days, Jane's experiments became more invasive. She needed larger samples, more data. Blue seemed to grow weaker with each extraction, but the results were too promising to stop now. Jane started sleeping less, working through the night, her notes becoming increasingly messy and filled with grand ideas about medical breakthroughs. When Blue began refusing to cooperate, Jane found ways to restrain it. "This is for science," she told herself. "The discomfort is temporary, but the benefits could be eternal." 1 week after her first test on Spot, Jane stood in her bathroom, holding a syringe filled with a highly diluted sample of Blue's blood. Her reflection showed dark circles under her eyes and uncombed hair. "Just a small dose," she whispered to herself. "I need to understand how it works in human tissue." Blue had tried desperately to communicate something about connection and changing, but Jane dismissed it as fear tactics. The needle pierced her skin. The clear fluid entered her bloodstream. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a pleasant warmth spread through her body, followed by a sensation of incredible clarity and strength. That night, Jane dreamed of stars and distant worlds. She dreamed of Blue's home. And somehow, she knew these weren't just dreams. Jane woke the next morning feeling better than she had in years. Her vision seemed sharper. She could read the tiny print on medicine bottles without her glasses. The constant ache in her back had disappeared. But most striking were the thin blue lines now visible beneath the skin of her arms, like glowing veins. "Side effects?" she muttered, examining herself in the mirror. "Temporary, probably." When she entered the lab, Blue was pressed against the far side of its enclosure. Its lights flickered rapidly in patterns that seemed almost frantic. "What's wrong?" Jane asked, approaching the tank. Suddenly, a wave of emotions hit her: fear, warning, desperation. These feelings weren't her own. Jane stumbled backward. "What was that? Are you in my head?" Blue's lights formed a pattern Jane had seen before: connection. "We're connected now?" Jane's scientific excitement briefly overcame her unease. She grabbed her journal and began writing. "The compound creates some kind of psychic link. I can feel what you feel." Throughout the day, the connection grew stronger. Random thoughts and languages Jane didn't understand flashed through her mind. Images of strange landscapes and unfamiliar stars appeared when she closed her eyes. By evening, the blue lines had spread across her chest and up her neck. When she checked her reflection, Jane noticed tiny lights pulsing beneath her skin, just like Blue's. "This is happening too fast," she whispered, her hands shaking as she drew a blood sample from herself. Under the microscope, her cells were changing, restructuring themselves to match patterns she'd seen in Blue's tissue. Blue was watching her intently, its lights now steady and calm, as if it had been waiting for this. "What's happening to me?" Jane demanded, slamming her hand against the glass tank. A clear thought entered her mind, not in words but in perfect understanding: we become one. Always happen this way. You knew this would happen? Jane felt anger rising, but it quickly transformed into something colder and more calculating. New ideas were forming in her mind, thoughts that didn't seem entirely her own. She needed more subjects to understand this process. More specimens. More data. Jane looked at her notes from the past week, barely recognizing her own handwriting. The once methodical scientist had been replaced by someone obsessed, writing about perfect symbiosis and evolutionary advancement. That night, Jane didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, watching the lights dance beneath her skin, and planning her next experiments. The transformation had only just begun. Jane spent the next 3 days modifying her home. She installed motion sensors in the yard, rid cage traps near the tree line, and lined her property edge with food that would attract animals. The changes to her body continued. Blue patches had formed on her neck and hands, and she could now make them glow at will. We need more test subjects, she told Blue, who now sat in an open container. There was no need for a cage anymore. They both knew Blue wouldn't leave. They were connected now, two parts of something new. Blue merely pulsed its lights in agreement. It had grown stronger as Jane changed, as if drawing energy from her transformation. That night, Jane checked her traps. Success: a rabbit, 2 squirrels, and a neighbor's cat. She carried them all to her basement, ignoring their frightened struggles. Perfect specimens, she whispered, her voice slightly different now, with an odd humming quality. She prepared syringes of her blood, no longer fully human, and began the injections. By morning, all 4 animals showed signs of change. Blue patches on their skin, unusual calmness, and most importantly, a connection to Jane's mind. She could feel them, direct them with her thoughts. A hive mind, Jane wrote in her journal. We become connected, yet I remain in control. The doorbell rang, startling Jane from her work. Through the peephole, she saw Officer Tom from the local police. Ms. Miller? Got a minute? He called through the door. Jane quickly pulled on a turtleneck sweater and gloves to hide the blue patches before opening the door. Hello, officer. What can I help you with? Tom looked uncomfortable. We've had reports of missing pets in the area. The Phillips cat, the Johnson's dog. Anyone strange been around? Jane felt a cold calculation replace her initial panic. No, nothing unusual. Though I did see some coyotes near the woods last week. As they spoke, Jane noticed Tom glancing past her, his eyes narrowing at the unusual equipment visible in her living room. Doing some science experiments? He asked. Just a hobby, Jane replied. Inside her mind, she felt Blue's warning. The officer was suspicious. Mind if I look around? Tom asked casually, but his hand rested near his gun. Do you have a warrant? Jane asked, feeling the animals in the basement responding to her growing tension. Tom studied her face. I could get one. As he turned to leave, he added, By the way, what happened to your eyes? They look different. Jane touched her face, realizing she hadn't checked her reflection today. Just an infection. Nothing serious. After he left, Jane rushed to the mirror. Her eyes had changed. The whites were now pale blue, with tiny lights swimming across them like stars. She wasn't becoming alien. She already was. Jane knew time was running out. The blue patches had spread across most of her body now, and the light patterns beneath her skin moved constantly, forming symbols and images from a world she'd never seen but somehow remembered. In the basement, her test animals sat in perfect stillness, their eyes showing the same blue glow as hers. Through their shared connection, Jane could see through their eyes, control their movements. They were no longer separate creatures. They were extensions of herself. Blue had grown stronger. Its body now pulsed with bright light, almost too intense to look at directly. You needed me to change, Jane said, the realization finally clear in her mind. This was your plan all along. Blue's response flowed directly into her thoughts. We search for suitable worlds. We sent scouts. You were perfect, alone, curious, willing to take risks. The perfect host. Host? For what? The answer came not in words but in images, hundreds of ships descending to Earth, carrying thousands of Blue's kind. They would make more humans like Jane, bonding with them, joining minds until the entire planet was connected. The lights in the sky, Jane whispered. You called them. They're coming. Soon, Blue confirmed. When they sense my signal is strong, they will find us. Jane stumbled to her desk, her increasingly alien mind fighting against the last remnants of her humanity. Through the haze, she remembered who she had been, a scientist, a human being. Not this creature she was becoming. Outside, she heard car doors slamming. Officer Tom had returned, probably with a warrant. Through the window, she saw police cars and what looked like government vehicles. A moment of clarity hit her. She understood now what needed to be done. Jane moved quickly, gathering chemicals from her lab. Flammable liquids, reactive compounds. She placed them strategically around the house, creating a chain that would leave nothing behind. Blue sensed her plan and tried to stop her, sending waves of pain through their connection. But Jane pushed back with her remaining willpower. You chose the wrong person, she told Blue, striking a match. I won't be responsible for the end of humanity. As the first flames spread, Jane heard pounding on her front door. Through the test animal's eyes, she could see more strange lights in the sky above, the invasion force arriving. Jane closed her eyes as the fire reached the chemicals. Her last thought wasn't fear or regret, but a warning sent through the connection to the approaching ships. Earth is protected. We will fight back. The explosion lit up the night sky, bright enough to be seen for miles. Where Jane's house had stood, nothing remained but ashes, and a warning to the stars.